Hi, I'm Celso from Guara.ca, and today I want to talk about why and how I don't use any third-party add-ons to make topology in Blender. And when I say third-party, I mean I don't use anything that doesn't already come with the vanilla copy of Blender. So I already imported my mesh into Blender. This was sculpted in Nomad Sculpt, and I gotta clarify something that before I used to actually sculpt something to completion. So my sculpt was the best the model would ever look, and then I would do topology after. And I always felt like my model died a little bit on that process. Similar to when you do a sketch and you try to ink afterward, if you're tracing too much, the drawing loses life, loses energy. I always felt the same when it came to doing topology, and I changed my approach. So nowadays, I don't take the sculpt to completion. I just get it as a couple steps after blocking, and that's what I take where I go to topology. Sometimes I don't even, in this case, I don't even have clothing done. I'm gonna do that after. And the reason for it is I'm finishing the sculpt on the actual topology, on the actual model, so the best the model is ever gonna look is actually the final version of it, which is amazing. Well, I did say that I don't use anything that doesn't already come with Blender, but I do use a couple add-ons that come with Blender but not active. And those are easy to find. You go to the add-on tab and you type F2, and all that does is make it easier for you to create new polygons. I also use modifier tools and loop tools. So those are pretty much the three things that you need to have enabled in order for my technique to work. Before I get too far on the how, I want to talk about the why a little bit. There's some amazing add-ons that can actually speed up and have some fancy tools that look amazing, especially on a demo. But the way I work, I only need the very basic of those tools. I don't use the fancy stuff. And on top of that, I have two major reasons. Cost, because, you know, like you pay 20 bucks here, 30 bucks there, 80 bucks sometimes for a good topology add-on. And it piles up, right? Blender gets updated very often, and sometimes the add-ons don't catch up with it. There was a moment in time where I had like 3 or 4 versions of Blender installed at the same time because the add-on for topology never got updated, at least took forever. So I have one version for topology, one Blender version for rendering, because I was using some add-ons for NPR style render. That one never got updated, and I had the latest version of Blender had some amazing tools when it came to grease pencil and sculpting. So I was using one version for modeling and sculpting, one version for topology, another version for rendering, and I just got sick of it. So I'm eliminating as many third-party stuff as I can and trying to stick with vanilla Blender as much as possible. That being said, I do use a lot of add-ons, but not really for topology. So I already imported the model. I have a few collections that I'm not gonna need for now, and a few parts that I'm not gonna need for now, so let me just turn those off. I do like to start by creating a plane, so mesh plane, and this, sorry, my 3D cursor wasn't set to origin, so I'm gonna do an Alt G to send the model back to the center of the scene, and I'm also gonna do a Shift C to send the 3D cursor back to the center of the scene. Okay, so my first step is I press tab to go into edit mode, Control R, I click one segment here, right click to accept without changing location. I press 3 to go to polygon mode, select it, and delete half of it. And that's because we're about to add symmetry to it. And that's the first thing that I add here, modifier, is a mirror. So we're gonna build a modifier stack that's pretty much the same for every time that I do this. Bisect, I turn it on, and that just means that it cuts whatever is on the left side of the screen. It's not gonna exist. Sometimes if you don't have bisect on, it might get duplicated into the other side. Flip, only if I deleted the right side, but I did the left. Clipping, I turn it on because this keeps the center from moving out of the center. Sometimes I have to turn it off for a few seconds to do a few adjustments if things get out of hand. And merge is also on. So with all this in place, first thing that I like to do is turn on my snapping tool on face, and I'm gonna move this into the character's forehead, vertex by vertex. So G to snap, G to snap. And the reason why is just so I can have a better sense of what I'm doing for the next modifiers. So one last thing I like to do is turn on the cage so I can see both sides at the same time when in edit mode. We can see the mesh there for two reasons. One, it is kind of on the inside even though I did snap it. And two, they're the same color. So to make things more distinguishable from each other, I like to come here to this arrow drop down menu and change the color from material to random. So the next modifier that I add is the shrink wrap, and I just select the target, click on screen, sphere 1, and I always turn on the edit mode and the cage thing here so you can better see what you're doing when in edit mode. Anyways, so one way to fix this would be changing the offset. This not always work. Right now, one vertex is remaining there. I don't know why. But even if it did work, I usually prefer to add a displace modifier instead. I think it's more reliable and easier to turn on and off when needed. I just do a very small value here, so 0.005 maybe. Okay, so now I can see the model, but still a little bit sunk in, right? That's because the resolution is very low. So I'm also gonna add a subdivision modifier. Where is it? Subdivision surface. That did help. But the problem is this is under the displace, under the shrink. I need this to be above so it gets applied first. So now the subdivision is being applied before, and this can be a little bit misleading. I need more vertexes so I can see what I'm doing better, but by having the smoothness being applied here, I don't know what's actually going on, so I'm gonna change here from Catmull Clark to simple. That way it's no longer like it is being subdivided, but it's not being smoothed. So where the vertex is, the main cage here, where that is, it's where it's gonna be. And on the displays here, I need to turn those two on. So now I can see exactly what I'm doing, and I can just start pretty much modeling. And that's the good thing about using this method is if you are a modeler, you're already used to the hotkeys and everything to actual model. So these you're using the same tools as you normally are for modeling, but for topology. So you have the snapping on and a few modifiers. Other than that, same old, right? Like you extrude and you move, and you can add loops by using the insert edge loop tool. So it's same old modeling as you normally do, just with the only difference being it's automatically snapping. So I only position those two on the forehead so I can test the modifier stack. But actually what I like to do is just extrude this again and duplicate and position one of those on around each main element. So one close to the eyes, one close to the mouth, one close to the nose, one on the jawline, and one close to the ears. Okay, so now that I have one polygon next to each major area, what I like to do is just make a circle around that area with the minimum amount of polygons possible, making sure that they are even number at least. Powers of 4 would be best, not always possible, so let's go for even numbers. And on anything that's gonna open, like eyes and mouth, top and bottom need to have the same number of edges. That will make your life easier. So I will do a single vertices on the corner. At some point I will add more, and it's gonna be 3 for each corner, but for now, like I said, minimum possible. The reason why I like isolating areas and laying down a first blocking on each area separate is the moment I start connecting stuff, it starts getting heavier. I start needing to add more segments in order to better connect those parts, and sometimes I end up not respecting the loops that I want to have, the flow. So by keeping as low as possible and isolating the areas, it allows me to preserve the flow that I intend to have. So the nose is a very detailed area, even when you go very simple. So keeping it very low on the nose is hard. And that's when I might have a slightly higher resolution for the nose, and if I was connecting everything already, that would make my mouth also be high resolution, and then the eye also being high resolution, you see? And by the way I'm creating polygons, I might not have mentioned, so far has been only extruding until I got to the nose here, and anytime you see me selecting a vertex, I press F to create a brand new face from a vertex, and that's due to the F2 add-on that we enabled when we started. But most time, if I select an edge, I'm doing E for extrude. If I'm selecting a vertex, is F to fill that face, to create a face there. So E to extrude, E to extrude. Here didn't work, so moving to vertex, and F to create a face. Now I can go back to E to extrude and select those two, F to fill the face and F to fill that face. So I'm actually pretty happy with the nose here. It's very low poly, and it's capturing the shape well. The ear suffers from the same problem as the nose, but depending on the style, it can be 3 times worse. It's really hard to keep the ear low resolution, so that's what we're gonna go for now. Now that we have all the parts with some topology around, before I start adding more resolution, let me just go and extend this one more loop So now I'm going, I have a loop around the eye crease and one loop around the eyelids. Okay, I'm gonna do pretty much the same thing for the mouth. And I do like this, like jumping back and forward all over the place. It's a little chaotic. I do enjoy it. Because as I'm finishing one area, I look at the other and I see that's lacking. So that's usually how I sculpt. That's usually how I model. You see here that different than the eye here, I actually connected on the center line. And that will keep, I will eventually do that for the eyes too. But when you start adding resolution, what this does, instead of having the mouth hole here, if I add an extra edge loop here, I'm adding top and bottom, so I don't need to keep counting and keeping track of poly counts, top and bottom. Okay, and now things get a little weird, right? Because if I fill this face, I don't have an edge going there. So I will fill this face and create a triangle here. This triangle is temporary. So two triangles, one top and bottom. It's just to help me keep the shape there with the center connected, right? When I come back here to add more loops on the mouth corner, that's when we're gonna solve the mouth opening as well. Okay, so we do have the foreheads there. I have an address and the jawline. Jawline, I'm gonna keep as low poly as possible because I know it's gonna increase as loops come from other areas. I'm not gonna connect the eyes yet because the corners, like I said before. One thing I like to do is extend the eyebrows here, like one square above, to mark where the eyebrows are gonna end. And anytime you have a loop going around and you're gonna have the next loop not going around anymore, it's gonna create what I call a star vertex. And a star vertex is basically, let me create one here. So if I make this keep going around, this vertex has four edges connecting to it, right? Now, if I decide that this is gonna come this way and this loop is going around that way, so now this loop is turning and this one is not, is coming from another direction, it's turning another way. It creates a star vertex. So this vertex doesn't have 4 edges connecting to it, it has 5. So this is something that people try to avoid, especially on highly stretched areas. But it's unavoidable because you need to surround the eye with a loop and you need to have this loop going somewhere else after. So having a star there, it's gonna happen somewhere. So what I like to do is use those stars as landmarks. In this case, this landmark is the corner, the inner corner of the eyebrow. So the eyebrow is gonna be sitting on top of this loop here. You see? So this is where the eyebrow is gonna be. And by having things lining up on, if it was fur, is the same. In this case, it's gonna be just a piece of geo on top, and they're gonna share the same vertices, especially on the extremities. So that helps when we get to rigging. Let me just extrude that to the center. So, you know, like this, it is gonna be a star at some points, but I'm not connecting there yet. The reason why I did this one now is because I like to do like the Mr. Incredible mask on the topology. So I like a loop going around the eyes and connecting here. Here we have a thing that I call, sometimes I like closing here, sometimes I like closing a little bit higher up. In this case, I'm gonna do it here. And what I mean by closing is instead of having 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops going up, I'm gonna turn this loop to close it, so only 3 are gonna go up from here. So you see here it's supposed to continue, right? Like if this used to be a straight line. So I push the center down a little bit and I'm gonna connect here to the middle. That way I'm reducing the amount of loops that are making its way upwards. It can be done here, it can be done higher up. In this case, I'm gonna do it here. I might regret it and change it later, but right now that's the decision I'm making. Editing's also here. Quick disclaimer. I decided against the loop closing here. I end up pushing all the way to the back. But pay attention on this part, because anytime you turn a loop, it's the same way. So the explanation is still valid. I just decided against using here. And I think we're good now for starting to close this. So I'm gonna add one loop here that's gonna mark the eye corner. Another loop here. So I like the eye corners to have 3 loops. Okay, and that also solves this problem, right? So now I close that loop as well. So let's just double check. I do have my raccoon mask. And I have my protected eye there. Now let's come to the other side and do the same. I create a loop and I move just the inner portion here. See? To preserve the eye corner a little bit better, and from there it just expands to the center of the other polygons. Sort of center, right? Okay, that's pretty good. I can adjust this a little bit and fill those. All right, so right now I have the mask there, the loop. Another thing that I like to do, one loop that I haven't done yet, I call it the muzzle, and pretty much I'm getting old, so mine is very evident here. The laughing line or the nasolabial wrinkle, whatever you call it. I call the muzzle loop for topology. So I pretty much extrude this edge, and I don't pay much attention at first at the other loops around it. Just make sure that I bring it around the mouth there. Those two I can merge, so I'm at center. So that's what I call the muzzle area. It isolates that area, and anytime you isolate an area, you're making it easier for you to identify those spots in rigging. Therefore, in animation as well, right? Okay, so just gonna create a little bit of a hole for the nose there. Trying to keep things as low poly as possible inside there. So this is a closed loop with 2 faces. Sometimes if I don't increase too much of the topology on the center here, I do close the loop similar to what we did here on this. This is a problematic area. I might undo this, you know. right now I'm gonna keep it that way just so I have a solid topology everywhere. I might delete that because this is an area that moves a lot, and adding an extra unnecessary star there is not a good idea. So I'm keeping it for now. I might delete later. But in there we go. I do like to protect the nose with an extra loop going around here. And those two I'm gonna merge. So I still have my muzzle loop. Now I have a nose protection loop. Now it's where things get complicated, right? Because the nose always adds complexion, and then I have to solve that complexion here. Let me add an extra loop there. I'm deleting this, which is breaking my mask loop. I'll probably create an connect it here instead, so I can preserve it. Now I created that triangle that I shouldn't have. So all I'm doing is sending the eye corner towards the center of the face. But also breaking this loop now, right? So this is the last round loop for the eye. I might add one extra here as well. Okay, still have my mask, still have my muzzle. Life is good. So here I will add an extra loop, top and bottom, because like I mentioned, mouth corners needs 3 loops, same as eye corners. And I will add another loop here on top of the mouth, just to connect those. Not happy with this face here. Because similar to what I said about the star, having 5 edges kind of adds a little bit mark when subdivided. Same thing happens when you have a corner, like 3 edges connected. So you gotta be mindful of where you position those. So I don't like this one whatsoever. And to solve that, I might actually need to rebuild this entire portion here. By choosing to go this low poly, I'm creating more problems for myself when making the topology, more challenges, but I'm also more comfortable making the topology. So I'm complicating the thing that I'm comfortable with to make it easier on the parts that I'm not comfortable with. Not bad. So I do have a star here. but there is no other star on that point, and the 2 stars for the nasal label line up, so it's actually not too bad. So here's that loop that I closed here, and I said that I would change afterwards. Let's change that now. Same thing here, just gonna extrude all those at the same time. Add another one there because why not? I'm gonna duplicate this face and I'm gonna make the neck as low poly as I think it should be. So right now I have 4 faces. It's very little. So 8 if you count both sides. That would be best case scenario, right? So here, very easy for me to close another loop here. Solve that, and I will connect those 2. Oops. I might have to check my normals here. Let me just face orientation. No, it's all good. That just scared me a little bit because it connected, flipped. Maybe I just selected on the wrong side. I might merge those 2 so I have 2 loops closing there. That's about right. So I'm selecting the cross section of the area that I'm looking at, and I'm gonna right click, loop tools, and press space. And what that does is makes the space between even. So before and after. This is like gold. Okay, one thing I like to do too is cut across some areas, because I am gonna resculpt a lot of this, right? Like subdivide and resculpt. For now, I want to keep this like it is. So one thing I like to do is I click on this vertex, I click on this vertex, and I press J to cut across everything, and then I can just Control X on those edges, and now I don't have that much of a zigzag there anymore. I can do that here as well. J. You know, like this gives a much cleaner first pass. And by isolating the areas like we did, like we actually have a very nice loop here that if, okay, the forehead's too square, you can either just like bring this down, or if you want, you can actually add an extra edge loop there and it's contained. So that's the reason why I like isolating those areas. It's very contained, so I can increase the resolution here, I can increase the resolution here as I please, and it's very contained. So usually we do have more loops to get a better blink, right? So I can add those as I please without worrying about where those where they're gonna end up, because it's a circle. They end up where they started. I'm gonna isolate this again. I'm gonna delete the displace. I'm gonna apply the shrink wrap. Actually, I'm gonna delete the subdivision. It's easy to bring it back. Apply the shrink wrap. And I'm keeping, the only modifier I kept is the mirror. So now I can select this edge, extrude it inwards. I will scale it a little bit. I do have eyeballs here somewhere that I can use. Yeah. I'm gonna isolate them both together just so I can see. These eyeballs came from Nomad, so they're like a smooth cube. And they might have to change position too. Isolate again. So this is gonna be like the thickness of my eyelids. Usually I like it being a little bit thinner on the corners. And that's another positive of being this low poly, because if I was at a higher poly count now, it would be a little bit harder for me to adjust that. Not much, but a little bit harder, right? So selecting this whole thing, extruding one more time, and I have 12 sides to this. I will do a S for scale, Y for the Y axis, and 0 just to flatten this inside here. And right click, face grid fill. I want for this fill, I want the inner corner to be connected on both sides, so I'm gonna offset this by 1, so I have that. And I will do a I to inset and scale down. I'm gonna move it back a little bit, expand the selection, scale up a little bit. Sometimes I even snap this to the actual eyeball. Another thing I can do is just use the spherify. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's Alt-Shift S. I'm actually gonna delete those two faces. Add an edge loop on each side here. And I'm gonna bevel this. Oh, I know what's happening. Bevel this, delete it. I confused myself with this. So I'm bridging those two, creating another loop there to be the corner. There we go. So because I don't have all the shrink wrap stuff anymore, it kind of got bent out of shape there. I should have done that before. Now it's a continuous loop. I can select it and extrude inwards. S, Y, 0, same as the eyes. G, Y to move it back. I created another loop on the middle there just for me to pull this up and down, so it's more like a mouth bag than a mouth cube. This is my base for topology, and I'll probably increase resolution as I need to preserve the shape. I'm also gonna use creases for this in subdivision and render time. So if I'm making a character for games, you can't rely on subdivision. You will have to increase this a little bit, which is a little bit counterintuitive because we call game characters low poly, but at their modeling stage, they sometimes are higher poly than the actual animation characters, because animation relies on subdivision and gaming usually doesn't. So yeah, that's it for today. Hope you learned something, and see you next time.